Good morning. Welcome to Face the State. I'm Rob Hanrahan. This week, U.S. Congressman Scott Perry from Cumberland, York, and Adams counties. Congressman, thanks for being with us once again here on Face the State. Always good to see you again here in the area. A lot going on around the world right now, so let's start with that because we are recording this program on Tuesday due to it being a holiday week. So it's very early in the week, but just today, Turkish forces shot down a Russian fighter jet over Syrian territory. The pilots may or may not have been killed.
That's the question. Was it? Well, that's one of the questions.
Which we don't
was
know
it over Syrian territory, right? The Turks claimed that it was over their airspace, and they warned them numerous times that it was going to happen. And you know, and to just understand completely the nexus, this is a NATO country like America, and the Turkish plane that shot it down was an American-made F-16. That's what the report is. So we are closely aligned, and this really draws the conflict and the complexity together for the world to see.
And the Russian President Putin is already promising some type of retaliation. Now, we don't know what that would be, so we're going to try to avoid that specific issue because we don't know what's going to be happening by Sunday when you're watching this program. But before you came on, you said you wanted to talk overall about the situation going on in Syria and how to address it. Do you think the president is going in the right direction?
I don't know what direction he's going in, quite honestly, other than it seemed to be a direction of retrenchment where we just stay out of everything. And if it were just confined to Syria and even Iraq, that would be bad enough, right? But it isn't confined to there. It's metastasizing around the globe. And for instance, when the president still at this point refuses to call it Islamic extremism or terrorism, understanding it's not just ISIS, it's Al-Qaeda, it's Boko Haram, it's a Khorasan group. I mean, there's a litany of these organizations that
and unnamed groups that are just out
once
there.
One goes, another one will pop up, right? But there's a central theme here. And while the president might not think that ISIS is Islamic extremism, there's a guy that's got a PhD from Baghdad University in Islamic studies, and oh, by the way, he happens to run and started ISIS, right? So it seems like he knows something, and if we're ever going to get to what the core of this issue is and the problem is and find a solution, we're going to have to acknowledge some things and get in the fight here somehow and have, when the president talks about a strategy, quite honestly, I looked at the speech and the words, and people were phoning and texting at that moment. What is the strategy? And I don't know what it is.
I often wonder, if you were able to wipe out ISIS, so there's a lot of arguments, you got to have boots on the ground, you have to have the airstrikes to go with it, you can't just do it by air. At this point, with all of the groups you mentioned, if you wipe out ISIS, are you really wiping out terrorism?
That is the reason to call it Islamic extremism, because it is bigger than ISIS. Before, it was Al-Qaeda, right? We were all focused on Al-Qaeda. The president said they were on the run and they were decimated and we weren't going to have to worry about them anymore. And here comes ISIS. And after Boko Haram, actually, I think from a statistical standpoint, is shown to have killed more people than ISIS has. Boko Haram, right? But that's in North Africa. So, again, we need to get to the root of the problem to find a solution. We have to acknowledge certain things. We have to acknowledge the reality of the situation.
To you and I, 9/11 is seared into our memories. When you saw what happened in Paris, what went through your mind?
Well, it's happening again, and it's very predictable, unfortunately. We wish the world were different, but it is not. And until we, again, it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant for people. Nobody likes any of this stuff, and we try and assign our values and the things that are important to us in this country on these other cultures, the other nations. It is not that way. The reality is that it's different for them, and they see us differently, and we have to accept the reality of the situation and get to the business of working on it, as opposed to just hoping it will go away, or those people who have been fighting for thousands of years will just fight amongst themselves and leave us out. That is not the case at this point. And so, unfortunately, it was not surprising. It is horrific. It is tragic. And we're all holding our breath, waiting for the leader of the free world to say how we're going to get engaged to make sure that this doesn't happen in our own hometown. That's what we're waiting for.
How do you feel about Syrian refugees being allowed in?
Look, what's happening to them is horrific in most cases. However, we have all taken an oath and a charge to uphold and defend the Constitution and defending our nation. And with all due respect, we have had even the president who has said this belies our, what our heritage is and our culture and so on and so forth. Even this president stopped Iraqi immigration back in 2011 when it was known that Iraqi terrorists had infiltrated those refugees. ISIS had said they're going to do this. They have told us they told us they were going to do it in Europe, and then they were going to attack Europe. They told us that they're going to infiltrate these refugees to America and then attack America. Why wouldn't we believe them? And if that's the case, we must make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can to make sure that the people that are here, that Americans are safe. Sure, we want to do as much as we can for them. And oh, by the way, America is the most generous nation on the planet in this regard. We've already given 10 times more than the other nations to make sure that they're safely housed and taking care of these refugees, right? It doesn't say that we have to bring them here and house them right next to them when we don't know who they are. And when we say we have a robust vetting process, Americans know instinctively there is a vetting process, but it can only be as robust as what you're comparing it to. There's nothing of validity to compare it to. There's no records that we can go to in Bashar Assad's organization or government and say, hey, we've got this gentleman, he says, you know, that you've been persecuting him. Can we confirm or deny this? So we don't know. We're taking them at their word for it. It is just simply too dangerous. So we've asked for a pause in Congress, a pause which seems reasonable. It's been done in the past to make sure that Americans are safe.
The president does not for that, though. So do you feel you have enough support to override?
Well, in the House,
bill to him?
In the House, it appears we do, and I think that pressure will continue to grow as these attacks and arrests in Europe continue to happen. Look, the ISIS claims that it shot the 2 Russian pilots in their chutes on the way down from that plane. They make that claim, so I'm not here to validate or verify that. They also claim that they shot down the helicopter that was going to rescue these 2 pilots. Those are opposed to Geneva Convention rules. What I think Americans need to understand is this enemy doesn't abide by the Geneva Convention. This is a whole different way of doing things, and we have to do everything we can to maintain our safety. And so I think we do have the votes to override in the House. The Senate is another question. Hopefully we can get the bill through. But again, I think pressure's mounting, and get us to the president for a desk, and then it's to his desk for a decision, and then it's up to him to say whether he vetoes it or support what the American people want.
To me, they're instilling more fear now than even right after 9/11 in New York, and I went through the trauma of that because the Paris attacks were just this combined, simultaneous attack of men with essentially small arms, automatic rifles, suicide vests, all around the city at the same time. Law enforcement is not ready for that in every city in our nation. What should be done about that? Or what could be done?
Well, what can be done is to minimize your threat by knowing who's here and monitoring the people that are potential threat issues. When you know that that certain people are on the watch list, but we have to divide our assets, just like you said, right? You only have so much to go around. And so by looking at every single American, including Perry and Hanrahan, in the context that I might be a terrorist or you might be a terrorist, meanwhile, we know that
I would want my country to look at me.
Right? But you don't want them staring at you all day long, which is what we have to do now, because due to political correctness, we can't say, well, these people have a proclivity because of, look, the Tsarnaev brothers came here as 2 young toddlers who were probably a cute bundle of joy for their family and for America. But they didn't turn out that way. And so instead of looking at Hanrahan, we need to be looking at people that seek asylum in this country, and especially when they do interesting things like go back to the country that was allegedly oppressing them. To me, that's a flag. But we don't.
There's also a bill out there supported by Dianne Feinstein and Representative Peter King called the Denying Firearms and Explosives to Dangerous Terrorists Act of 2015, citing reports from the GAO that up to 2,000 weapons have been sold to people on the terrorist watch list.
So it makes sense, right?
Would you support that?
I got to read through the bill, but I certainly
understand
and recognize and agree with the premise, and I think the premise gets to the fact that the National Institute system for buying some of these things isn't wed with the National Terrorist Watch List, right? So you need to put those 2 things together. You can't have terrorists or suspected terrorists buying weapons and explosive. You also can't have them working at your airport at TSA, but yet they are. So this is a horrific, fatal flaw in our monitoring system, again, for who should be watched as opposed to watching all of us.
I see there are so many moving parts here and a lot to talk about with that. We also want to get to other issues, your subcommittee on railroads, pipelines, and hazardous materials, and your fight to end the raid on Crime Victims Fund. The U.S. government using that money not for crime victims.
Unbelievable.
I had got to take a break, though, Scott.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back with more on Face the State.